Hari Om. Good morning, children. Nice meeting you after a long break. Hope things are going good. Okay, now let's do with the third unit. Today we are just dealing with the third unit, Prose, in celebration of being alive. A lesson by Dr. Christian Bernard, a doctor. This lesson actually portrays the dawn of understanding human life, and that too after meeting an accident. Through this lesson, we'll come to know that life is a business that involves celebration of being alive. It's not for pleasure, enjoyment, recreation or something. Truly speaking, being alive itself is a celebration. So we have too many celebrations, but being alive every day we'll have to celebrate of being alive, and this is more important. Because people take life easy and very pleasant until a misfortune strikes their life and they start thinking in that angle. So unless and until we are put into trouble, we are not able to focus on what life is. Now let us move through the lesson. First let's deal about the author. And I have given it in short, whereas in your text I think you are given a number of information about the author. Christian Bernard, he was a famous heart surgeon from South Africa. He performed the world's first human heart transplant operation. He always found the suffering of children particularly heartbreaking. And through this lesson, he gives his own experience. Like few years ago, he and his wife met with an accident while they were crossing the road. He dashed against his wife and she fell on the other side of the road. His wife had a badly fractured shoulder. Both of them had experienced the fear and agony in the hospital. So he asks a question, why should he suffer? There's a necessity for this suffering there, and for nothing at all, why should he experience this fear and agony? And this he totally disagrees with his father's view. He recalls his father's words, where his father used to say that God tests human beings, and the suffering undergone by the person refines him and makes him ennoble. Why should we take up this test? That is a question raised by Christian Bernard, and thereafter he is given to understand by the two great characters whom he meet at the hospital, and they teach him a profound lesson that what is important in life. And thereafter he comes to know that we will have to be contented with what we have, and first of all we will have to be happy being alive first of all. So this is the gist of the story that we have seen here. Next, key points. So through the key points, I think I'll just try to explain the entire lesson. First of all, this is an extract from Dr. Bernard's speech about an experience that changed his outlook of life altogether. As I told you, the two characters that changed his outlook totally, and we'll be knowing about the two boys actually. And Dr. Bernard's concern over the sufferings of people is reflected in his essay, and here he gives us a statistics, a data, asking us if we know that 125 million children born this year, of which 12 million are unlikely to reach the age of 1, and another 6 million will die before the age of 5. And of the rest, many will end up as mental or physical cripples. So this is what is happening, and he doesn't understand what is it actually, and he is raising a question that why should people undergo such a suffering here. Yeah, the suffering of the people reflected here. He says out of 125 million born, 12 million hardly reach a year of life, 6 million die and may rest, and of the rest many will end up as mental or physical cripples. Sad thought stems from an accident when his wife and himself are knocked down by a speeding car And thereafter, when he was admitted in the hospital, he comes to know about the true form of understanding of what life is. He experiences agony and anger, unable to understand why they had to suffer. As I already told you, they met with an accident while crossing the street after a meal, and they were thrown into the other lane and struck by a car coming from the opposite direction. And that is what he means by experiences agony and anger, unable to understand why they had to suffer. Dr. Bernard had broken 11 ribs while his wife had fractured her shoulder. And he had to take care of patients and his wife had to take care of a baby. But if they are admitted in the hospital, how are they to take care of the others there? And what is the suffering here? And why this unwanted, unnecessary suffering here? And what sort of experience is this? Only then he recalls his father's words and advice. His father advises, and he feels that if he had still been alive, he would have said, "My son, it's God's will." That's the way God tests you. Suffering ennobles you and makes you a good person. But Bernard found nothing noble in patient's suffering or a crying child. You can just look at the picture there. What does a child understand about the suffering and agony there? What is the nobility there? Why this should happen? And that is a question, and he disagrees with his father's word. If this is going to be the God's will, what sort of test is that? How it is going to make him happy? Okay, happiness lies in being alive, and only when we are alive we experience this joy or sorrow. And that is what. So life is very important. Unless and until you are alive, how are you to experience life there? See, now look at the controversial statement stated by his father and his disagreement towards this. Lack of sophisticated heart surgery and suffering children was disturbing as total trust was laid in doctors, leaving everything of fate. Here he just tries to focus that people trust on doctors there. They are next to God, and it's their hard work that was going to make them alive there. And what has this trust to do when people just entrust them of their treatment? Here he happens to meet two characters here, and he compares this to this Grand Prix of Cape Town's Red Cross Hospital. All of us know what is this Grand Prix here. This Grand Prix is one of the several international motor racing events, and here he finds two characters who enjoy their life, who don't even understand what sort of deed they are up to. So that morning, an unattended breakfast trolley was hijacked by a bold crew consisting of a driver and a mechanic. As I already told you, these are the two characters who taught Bernard a lesson, making him understand what life is. So here he talks about a crew of one driver and a mechanic. The mechanic gave motor power running behind the trolley, and the driver sat on the mower deck, steered by scraping his foot on the floor. You can just view the picture there. You can just see a boy without limbs just moving the trolley there, and one seated there on the driver's seat, steering and scraping his foot on the floor. The show was good. The plates scattered everywhere before the nurse scolded and put them back to bed. Now let us learn about the two characters here. The first one is the mechanic. He is 7 years old. He lost his eyesight after receiving severe third-degree burns as an impact of a fight between his drunken father and mother, who threw a lantern that missed his father and hit the mechanic instead. Hope you understand. here he talks about the driver and how he was pushed to such form here. He was 7 years old. One night his mother and father were drunk. His mother threw a lantern at his father, missed, and the lantern broke over the child's head and shoulder. He suffered severe third-degree burns on the upper part of his body and lost both his eyes. And at the time of Grand Prix is nothing but hijacking the trolley that was unattended there, and how the two boys took upon it. And this is compared to the Grand Prix here. And at the time of this Grand Prix, he was a walking horror with a disfigured face and long flap of skin hanging from the side of his neck to his body. He could not raise. He had to raise his head there if he wanted to open his mouth there. But you know what the boy said when he met the doctor? He said that he had one. He had one, and he was laughing at his deed, it seems. Poor thing. And that is what Bernard was not able to understand. After all, a boy of 7 years old was not able to understand what is the life there. He was just enjoying his life there, and he even commented that he had won the race. The next character, and he is already known to the doctor there, the trolley driver was known better to the author there. A few years earlier, he had successfully closed a hole in his heart. The driver. He had returned to the hospital because he had a malignant tumor of the bone. A few days before the race, his shoulder and arm were amputated, means cut, and there was a little hope of his recovery. And after the Grand Prix, he proudly informed Bernard that the trolley's wheels were not properly oiled, but he was a good driver and he had full confidence in the mechanic. Now look at the two creatures there, one with a third-degree burn and the other with amputated limbs, teaching a lesson to the doctor himself. And he was able to learn this lesson because he met with an accident and he was put up in the same hospital, and he just compares the deed of the boys, that is trying to hijacking the trolley, the unattended trolley, and the doctor compares it to the Grand Prix here. So once again, the mechanic was 7 years old who lost his eyesight, receiving the third-degree burns as an impact of a fight between his drunken father and mother. Okay, and he was a walking horror. And the other character who was successfully attended by the doctor who closed a hole in the driver's heart with a malignant tumor of the bone, his arm was amputated, but he had a full confidence in the mechanic. Look at the wordings of the two boys there. They were just not bothered about the others and they were entertained. That is another case. And these were entertained and encouraged by the other patients there by clapping and shouting, and this motivated them to go on further. Okay, both had their own comments leaving that the wheels were not oiled properly, and the other one saying that he had won the race here. So these two children teach a lesson of getting on with the business of living, which is a celebration of being alive. That is what he had learnt. Okay, he realized the two children had given him a profound lesson in getting on with the business of living. So business of living is not merely for pleasure, enjoyment or recreation, because the business of living is joy in the real sense of the word, not just something for pleasure. The business of living is the celebration of being alive. He had been looking at the suffering from the wrong end. He accepted that he had always been on the opposite side, disagreeing his father's statement too. We don't become a better person because of the sufferings, but we become a better person because we have experienced the sufferings. And here he comes to the segment of the lesson where he appreciates the light. If at all we hadn't known darkness, we cannot appreciate the light. And we can appreciate warmth if we have never suffered. We cannot appreciate warmth if we have never suffered cold. And these children showed him that it is not what we have lost that's important. What is important is what you have left. Therefore, the lesson teaches us the personal values of life, and life is more after he undergoes a debilitating suffering. So, it's a wonderful lesson that gives us a lot of hope. Actually, we don't understand what is life, and we always stand to the opposite side to understand what it is. Actually, this lesson teaches you that only when we are stuck by a misfortune, we stand there looking from that angle or from that point of view to understand what actually life is. And here life is not mere entertainment or recreation. It's just a business of living, which is the celebration of being alive. First of all, we'll have to celebrate every day. As soon as we get up, we'll have to celebrate and thank God for being alive there, and thereafter going to the happy progress of the day. So, once again, I think we'll just try to consolidate the lesson here. We are dealing with third unit, Prose in Celebration of Being Alive, written by Dr. Christian Bernard. As I already told you, I have given you a very short introduction about the author here, but when you refer to the text, you come across a lot of information given here. Christian Needling Bernard was born in rural South Africa to poor parents as their fourth child. He evinced great interest in his academics and was determined to pursue medicine after the loss of his brother to a cardiac ailment. Okay, himself had chosen this profession because of his brother. He won many scholarships and pursued his higher studies, specializing in the cardiac surgery. And as a cardiac surgeon, Bernard focused on congenital and complicated cardiac conditions for which there was no cure at that time. After experimenting with heart transplantation on animals, he performed the world's first human-to-human heart transplant in the year 1967. He gained worldwide recognition and went on to develop many surgery techniques which are being adopted till date. Bernard has penned 14 books and 235 scientific articles that have been published in reputed journals. Some of his books are One Life, 50 Ways of a Healthy Heart, The Best Medicine, and The Faith. A pioneer in cardiac surgery, he obtained a doctorate in medicine from the University of Cape Town. This was followed by 11 honorary doctorates bestowed upon him by universities all over the world. He has also received 36 international awards. In his late years, he established the Christian Bernard Foundation to serve and promote the cause of underprivileged children throughout the world, and died at the age of 78 in the year 2001. As I already told you, children, I have given you a very short gist about the author, but in your text you are given with a lot of information. Such a great doctor hadn't understood the life unless he had struck by an accident with his wife. Thereafter, when he was admitted in a hospital, through the two characters, he understands what is the importance of life. He understands the importance of being alive. He seems to be such a great personality, conferred with a number of honorary doctorates from various universities, but he was given to understand the life only by the two children. After all, a 7-year-old driver and mechanic who considered themselves to have attended a race, the Grand Prix, who through their deeds make him understand the importance of being alive. Okay, now coming to this introduction, as I already told you, it's again a repetition only. Few years ago, he refers to the Dr. Christian Bernard and his wife met with an accident while they were crossing the road. He dashed against his wife and she fell on the other side of the road. His wife had a badly fractured shoulder and both of them had experienced a fear and agony in the hospital. He totally disagreed with his father's view that God tests human beings and suffering ennobles a person. It's a truth statement actually. As you sow, so you reap. To every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. If you do good, you will be rewarded with good. If you do bad, you will be rewarded with the bad there. And that is what he means by God gives a test there, and it is based on that test we prove ourselves there. The sufferings refines a person there and even ennobles a person. So he gives a statistics there over the sufferings of the people, that is reflected in his essay, and out of 125 million born, 12 million hardly reach a year of life and 6 million die before 5 years of age. So sad thoughts stem from an accident when his wife and himself were knocked down by a speeding car. As I already told you, he did not know, he didn't understand why people should undergo such a suffering there, and he himself had the sad thought when he met with an accident there when he was knocked down by a speeding car. He experiences agony and anger and he was unable to understand why they had to suffer, and the doctor had broken 11 ribs while his wife had fractured her shoulder. Both had to take care, enough to do with. He had to take care of his patients and his wife had to take care of a baby there. But how could they attend to the patients and a baby when they were put up in the hospital? Only then he recalls his father's advice that God tests man to make him a better person. And he is given a life, he experiences it. Bernard found nothing noble in patient suffering or a crying child. Lack of sophisticated heart surgery and suffering children was disturbing, as a social trust was laid in doctors, leaving everything to fate. Here the Grand Prix of Cape Town's Red Cross Hospital was an eye opener. You can see the picture there. You find two boys who just started with their race by taking this unattended trolley there. That morning an unattended breakfast trolley was commandeered. Here hijacked by a bold crew, and this crew contained only two members here, a driver and a mechanic. The mechanic gave motor power running behind the trolley and the driver sat on the mover deck steered by scraping. Hope this reminds you about Irattai Pulavargal, which we had learnt in Tamil. One was blind, the other was crippled. The cripple was on the shoulder of the blind because their destiny was towards the same place. And similarly, this is a story where you come across two boys, a driver and a mechanic. The mechanic, the blind, taking the role of the driver. He sat on the mover deck steered by scraping his foot on the floor. And then you have the driver there. The show was good on the whole. They were encouraged by the other patients who were standing around them, clapping and encouraging them for their deed. The plates scattered everywhere before the nurse scolded and put them back to bed. And here the author gives a description about the two boys there, the mechanic and the driver. The mechanic is 7 years old. He lost his eyesight after receiving severe third-degree burns as an impact of a fight between his drunken father and mother, who threw a lantern that missed his father and hit the mechanic instead. At the Grand Prix, he was a walking horror. But towards the end, he just told that he was a winner of the race there. And the other driver, the Bernard knew him already. He had successfully closed a hole in the driver's heart. With a malignant tumor of the bone, his arm was amputated. He had a full confidence in the mechanic. Okay, even he had his own blame on the wheels that were not oily, but he was a good driver and he had full confidence on the mechanic too. These two children teach a lesson of getting on with the business of living, which is a celebration of being alive. And through this, he enlightens us that we become a better person after having experienced suffering. It's not what we lose that matters, but what is left behind. So the lesson teaches the value of a person, the value of life, and after he undergoes a debilitating suffering. So the children have opened his eyes and have made him understand that it was not what he had lost that's important, but what is important, that what he had left. So once again, life is a business that involves celebration of being alive, and you know, life is full of ups and downs, it's full of joys and sorrows. Unless and until you enjoy it, you experience it, you will never know the value of life. So life is just not for pleasure or enjoyment or recreation, but it truly talks about the importance of being alive and later on the suffering. So people try to take life only from their side until a misfortune strikes them. Only then they just stand or view the point of struggle from that side, and they just try to solve the problem here. So we are given with a wonderful lesson of how to take life and how to value life. It's not what we have lost that matters, but what is left behind and how are we to carry ourselves throughout. Thank you, children. Hope you have understood the lesson and try to understand the lesson from the two boys, the mechanic and the driver, who had no hope of recovery at all, but even they were confident enough to prove, and they teach every reader a lesson of how to carry themselves with positivity and patience and perseverance. Let us wait for the problems there. Only when we have the problems, we will think of the solutions. Hope this lesson will enlighten you, and hope you will learn the value of light, which is proved in the absence of darkness. And let us try to appreciate the warmth, which will never know if you haven't suffered the cold there. Okay, wish you all the best. God bless you, children. Take care. Try to go through your daily lessons as scheduled, and wish you all the best. Thank you.